In recent years, the topic of tariffs has taken center stage in economic and political discussion. Once seen as a niche issue reserved for trade experts and policymakers, tariffs have become a major talking point. As of 2025, discussions around tariffs are intensifying, and internet searches for the term have surged. Yet despite this renewed interest, many people still don't fully understand what tariffs are or how they work. Warren Buffett, one of the most respected voices in the world of finance, recently broke a long silence to offer insight into the issue. In a rare interview, he warned about the economic fallout that could stem from an aggressive tariff policy, calling tariffs an act of war to some degree. His remarks are timely and urgent, especially as global trade policies evolve and the American economy faces new headwinds. To understand the broader implications of tariffs, it's helpful to unpack their mechanics and look at their long-term effects on industries, jobs, inflation, and the national economy. What is a tariff? At its core, a tariff is a tax imposed by governments or imported goods. Imports are products made outside the country and brought in for domestic consumption. The purpose of a tariff is to make foreign-made goods more expensive so that locally produced alternatives become more attractive to consumers. In theory, this helps boost domestic manufacturing by leveling the playing field between local companies and international competitors who might benefit from lower production costs. Let's consider an example involving two key trading partners, the U.S. and Mexico. Imagine a U.S. automaker evaluating production costs. If it costs $30,000 to build a car in the U.S. but only $25,000 to build the same car in Mexico, the company might be tempted to shift manufacturing operations south of the border to maximize profit. However, if the U.S. government imposes a 25% tariff on vehicles imported from Mexico, the $25,000 car suddenly comes with an added 6,250% tax. And now the total cost brings the Mexican-made car into the U.S. market becomes $31,000, more than it would cost to produce the same car domestically. This scenario shows how tariffs can alter economic incentives by raising the price of foreign goods. They aim to make the U.S.-made products more appealing, potentially preserving domestic jobs and encouraging local investment. However, this policy tool can also come with significant downsides. Tariffs and inflation, a direct connection. One of the biggest concerns with tariffs is their contribution to inflation, since tariffs raise the price on imported goods and the end consumer often ends up paying more. There's no magical entity, no tooth fairy, as Buffett puts it, that absorbs these added costs. They're passed directly on to consumers in the form of higher prices at the store, dealership, or online. This is particularly problematic in industries with thin profit margins, like the auto sector. Most car companies operate on profit margins of just 3 to 5%. And when costs increase, they're left with few choices, particularly pushing the cost to consumers. Buffett emphasized that prices will continue to rise over time, especially in an environment where trades and tariffs restrictions are prevalent. He reminded listeners that inflation is not a short-term phenomenon, but a long-term challenge. Prices will be higher 10, 20, or even 30 years from now, he warns. Buffett didn't shy away from commenting on the political challenges behind trade policy. He noted that Washington often finds itself in a bind, needing to make constant compromises, which makes implementing coherent long-term strategies difficult. He pointed out that while some countries might exploit the global trade system, the U.S. has also been guilty of that in the past. Trade should be mutually beneficial, and while defending local industries is important, doing so through broad tariffs may not always be the best solution. The U.S. needs balanced policies that promote trade while protecting national interest. One of the main reasons cited for imposing tariffs in the U.S. trade deficit, which has reached staggering levels. In 2024, the U.S. has a trade deficit of $918 billion, meaning the country imported nearly $1 trillion more in goods and services than it exported. This imbalance is a significant concern for economists like Buffett. Back in 2003, Buffett penned an article in Fortune outlining his worries about the growing trade deficit, even when it was around 3% of GDP. His concern wasn't about specific countries, but about the long-term impact of consistently consuming more than the country produces. Every time the U.S. runs a trade deficit, it effectively sends money abroad. Money is then used by foreign countries to purchase U.S. assets. This transfer of wealth and ownership, as Buffett describes it, is akin to giving away claim checks on America's future. The more foreign entities invest in the U.S. assets, the more they're entitled to a portion of its future profits. Over time, this erodes national economic sovereignty. One of the clearest and most immediate consequences of trade deficits and offshoring is the loss of manufacturing. When companies move production overseas to cut costs, domestic factories shut down and workers lose this job. This phenomenon has played out dramatically across the U.S., and the auto industry offers a textbook case study. Suppose a U.S. car company has 10 manufacturing plants. To stay competitive, it relocates 5 of them to lower-cost countries. That move results in the closure of 5 domestic plants, leading to massive job loss in the communities. This isn't hypothetical, it's history. U.S. manufacturing employment peaked at nearly 20 million workers in '79, but has since declined to around 12 million of 2025, even though the population has grown significantly. This hollowing out of American manufacturing has been devastating and has consequences for many cities, like Detroit or Michigan. Once a thriving hub for the auto industry, Detroit was the fifth largest city in the country in the 50s, with a population of 1.85 million and more millionaires than anywhere else. However, as foreign competition intensified and domestic manufacturers lost market share, Detroit's fortune crumbled. Two of the big three automakers filed for bankruptcy in 2009, and the city's population fell to around 600,000, a shocking transformation from its former prosperity. A lesser-known consequence of the trade deficit is the growing foreign ownership of American assets. Buffett described this as other nations holding claim checks on the U.S. future wealth. Here's how it works. When the U.S. buys goods from another country and doesn't sell enough in return, the dollars sent abroad accumulate. These dollars are then used by foreign investors to purchase U.S. assets. For example, imagine a fictional country called Investorland, known for its luxury watches. If America buys $5 billion worth of watches from Investorland in a year, and Investorland doesn't import anything in return, it ends up with $5 billion in U.S. dollars. Since these dollars are only usable in the U.S., Investorland turns around and invests in American businesses, properties, and government securities. Year after year, the cycle continues, and over time, Investorland owns a growing slice of America's economic pie. The dividends, interest, and profits from these assets flow out to the U.S. economy and into foreign hands. This long-term erosion of ownership is a major concern for economists who value national control over economic destiny. Tariffs, a double-edged sword. Given all the issues, the trade deficits, job losses, inflation, and foreign ownership, it's very easy to see why some advocate for tariffs. In theory, they serve as a corrective tool to restore balance and protect domestic industries. But as Buffett and many economists caution, tariffs are not a free lunch. While they preserve some jobs, they can also spark retaliation from other nations, reduce international cooperation, and make goods more expensive for American consumers. Moreover, tariffs introduce uncertainty into the business environment. Companies have a harder time planning long-term investments or hiring decisions when they don't know what the trade rules will look like in 6 months or a year. That hesitation can slow down innovation and growth. The path forward. As we move deeper into 2025, it's clear that tariffs are going to play a larger role in public discourse and economic policy. While they may offer some short-term advantages, the long-term implications need to be carefully weighed. As Buffett put it, the U.S. must be cautious not to sell off its future for the sake of temporary economic comfort. Maintaining a sustainable balance between imports and exports is essential not just for the economic health, but for the national stability. Still, despite the challenges, Buffett remains optimistic about America's future. Never bet against America, he often says, underscoring his belief in the country's resilience and innovation. The majority of the money he manages, he claims, will always be invested in U.S. companies. It's a message of cautious hope amid economic complexity. A reminder that while the path may be uncertain, the potential remains enormous.